Monday morning, everybody. Welcome to a live stream here at the Jayda InStitches show. Thank you guys so much for joining us today. We're going to have a little more spooky fun. We had some spooky fun on Friday. We had a video on Friday for our new Ghost Boo wall hanging, which I thoroughly enjoyed making. And some of you have already made it in a
Okay, try now.
All right, can anybody hear us now? Mr. InStitches is sort of fiddling with switches. It looks like it's glitching.
Mic was crackling before it stopped. I can hear now. Sound is back.
Sound is back. All right. Well, I don't know what that was about, but okay, we're back. Hi, everyone. Don't worry. I didn't say anything important. I don't know what that was about, but the sound is back. Hopefully it won't go anywhere, and no more technical issues to go forward. You know what? It's the squirrels. I didn't feed them this morning, and you know, I should know better by now, but anyway, everybody, glad you're all here. Let's talk cobwebs. We have a tutorial for this little cobweb here on our channel. It's from 2017, I think. It's actually, I kind of picked it up and looked at it today. I was sort of stunned. And I wanted to revisit it because it's been a while since I made some. I've made several of these, and I love them for a lot of different purposes. They're not just a pretty little doily to kind of put on the table or maybe on a side, you know, board or something. They look really cute underneath a little pumpkin. They look really cute draped over a pumpkin. And I even used one as a fancy applique. I attached it to the back of I have this one nifty jacket that's got all this sort of like crochet detailing in it. So I thought just for some fun, I would attach one to the back. So I actually used one as a big applique, and I wanted to show you guys that. Anyway, today I'm going to talk a little bit about changing up your material choice for this. I'm going to add some beads to the project just for some fun. And we're going to talk hook sizes and just other ways you can use it. So a big thank you to Nico, who gifted a membership before we got going, and congratulations to Krista, who won it. I'd like to thank Karen also for picking up a pattern at the Etsy shop just as we got going. And Amanda. Amanda has been a member for, let me see here, I got to roll back and find her little membership milestone, if I can. There she is. Amanda's been a member for 4 months. Thank you, Amanda. And she says, Happy Autumn. And I'm going to second that. Happy Autumn, everybody. So without further ado, let's get into it. I'm going to move my jacket out of the way just so it's not in the way, but I'm going to keep it nearby. So if I have to show you guys the jacket, I will. I've got my pretty little pumpkins. I'm just going to keep them to the side. And I'm going to talk materials. So in our original pattern, which by the way is in the shop and it's today's sneaky sale. So if you'd like to pick that up, please feel free to do so. It's up top and on sale all day today. I've got a pair of scissors, a yarn needle. I even have a smaller needle depending on the size of the thread or yarn that I use. So you want to have a needle that suits the yarn or thread that you're going to use. And so I may not need one of these. I don't know, it depends on what kind of time we're dealing with today. I have a selection of hooks. They're all different sizes because they do affect your tension when you're dealing with different weighted threads or yarn. And I've got some beads. Oh golly, Joanne, thank you for picking up a pattern. If you've got beads that your hook will fit through, you do not need to pre-thread them onto your yarn or thread. If you're using beads that your hook will not go through the middle of, you just need to pre-thread some onto your thread or yarn, and it's helpful to know how many you think you're going to need. So and also you can always put more on than you need, because once you fasten off, if you haven't used them all, you can just unthread them and put them back in your little package. So I've got some different kinds of threads here today. The original pattern calls for a size 3 fashion weight, which is perfectly fine. It makes the size of the one that's here on the back of my jacket, which is about 6.5 inches in diameter or 16.5 centimeters. So it's a nice size for a little doily or a rather large applique if you're thinking about that, or if you're going to use it as a decoration elsewhere in the house. So that's a nice size. Without changing the pattern, you can make it bigger by going up to a yarn weight that's maybe like a 2 or a 3 weight, and then upsizing your hook. So the original pattern calls for a 3.75 millimeter hook. You can go larger than that. You can use the same one. The thicker weighted yarn though will size it up. It'll get a little bit bigger. You can also increase the row counts by a couple more rows. The pattern's really obvious. You're just basically increasing the chain counts in between double crochets. So you have that option too. And you can go really, really fine and really, really colorful. So I've got this really lovely antique white thread. This is a size 10 crochet thread. I thought I might give this a go today because I just thought an antique colored web might look really nice. And if I have time, I might bust into my Fiesta crochet thread because I thought a brightly colored web might look kind of neat as well, especially if I add a bunch of beads. So pick your hook to suit your thread or yarn and your stitch size. So everybody's tension's a little bit different, but I'm going to use this size 10 thread. Goodness me. Joya, thank you for picking up a pattern. And hello to Soul Babe. Soul Babe Crafts. I love that. Louise. Louise has been a member for 70 months. My gosh. Thank you, Louise. Louise with a membership milestone says, good afternoon, Jada and everyone. I've uploaded my first video this morning, and so now I'm officially a content creator. Woohoo! Congratulations. Welcome to the wild, crazy world of content creation. And I'll drink a little tea to your success. Congratulations, Louise. All right, with this size 10 crochet thread, I'm going to use a slightly smaller hook. So like I said, the original pattern calls for a size 3 weight thread and a 3.75 millimeter hook, which is also an F, which is a pretty decent sized hook. But for the thread that's a size 10, I'm going to go down. So I'm going to make something a little bit smaller. So I'm going to use a B hook. This is also a 2.25 millimeter. So it's not very, not a whole lot smaller, but it's small enough, I think, that it'll make an official difference. And I'm probably going to need my actual needle as opposed to my yarn needle. This is like a little darning needle. It's got a big eye. Most importantly, you just need to be able to get your thread through it at the end, which I can do. So I'm also going to pre-thread some beads onto my thread so that I can add some beads to it. I've got silver, copper, and gold here, and I think I'm going to stick with silver, unless, I don't know, the gold? What do you guys think? Silver or gold? Silver or gold beads? That's the silver, that's the gold, and I'm using this lovely antique or ecru colored crochet thread. So what do you think looks better with it, the gold or the silver? Gold, silver, gold. So I see 2 gold, 2 silver, 3 silver, more than silver. So more silver than gold. Gold, gold, silver, silver. I love the ecru color too. Gold, gold. So right down the middle, gold, 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 silver, gold, silver. All right, a quick pull would be fine. In the meantime, I'll just pull some of these aside and I'll get them into 2 different piles. And I'm not going to bother with the copper. The copper just isn't the copper I don't think goes quite right with this yarn color. Oh, there goes one off the back of the roly-poly little things. I'm just going to put that back in there. So I'll put some more golds aside. I've got 12 points to my cobweb, so I want at least 12. And I'm thinking I might like to just randomly have a few in the middle of the web itself, because I think that might look kind of neat, like I've caught some beads in my little spider web. So I'm going to do that as well. And I'll just get a whole bunch of these out the way. Mr. InStitches, do you have a poll going?
Yes.
All right. Mr. InStitches has a poll going up at the top of the live chat. So if you're in the live chat, then cast your eyes upwards and you should see the poll there. And that's probably enough. What have I got? I need at least 12. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14. I can get a few more over there. Like I said, if you're going to preload beads onto your thread, have at least as many as you think you need, and then add a few more if you want, because you can always just take them off again at the end. And I'll have a few more gold there. All right, so whatever wins the poll, I will thread up onto my crochet thread, and the rest of it. I like sorting colors. Anybody else like to do this? Sort of just sort beads by color, beads, buttons, M&Ms, Smarties, whatever round thing might be in front of you. All right. As long as we've got a hearty number of votes on the poll, mister, you can call it. There we go. So 80 votes. All right.
83 votes.
83.
It's pretty close. We'll wait another minute.
It's close, is it? All right. The other nice thing about these beads is that I don't actually need a needle to thread them onto my crochet thread. I can just sort of get the thread through it. But if I want to be quick about it, I will thread them because I know that they'll definitely go over this needle. So I will quickly thread some. Here we go. All right, what color has won? Silver wins with 52% of the vote. Gold with a close 47. All right, so gold aside, my little copper aside. Hello, silver. So I'm going to thread up a whole bunch of beads. I'm going to say at least 12, definitely, and then probably a few more because I think I want to have some in the middle. I want one on the edge of every little tip of my web, and then I want some in the middle too. So I'm just threading them up on my needle, threading them onto my crochet thread. So there's 12, and now I'll add a few more just so I can randomly, I'll put 5 more on so I can sort of randomly add them here and there. I think that's enough. Okay. So I'll put the rest up there and I'll put them away later. So I've already loaded my beads onto my crochet thread. So they will just sort of continue to move up the thread as I crochet, and I'll use them as I need them. Here we go. You can use any weighted yarn you want for this. I do recommend a cotton or a mercerized or a very tightly wound yarn just so that it looks smoother and a little less fluffy. And use any hook that you're comfortable with for tension purposes. You don't want it to look too loose, but a little lacy is okay. We're going to start with a slip knot. And we're going to chain 6 to make a little ring. Now you can make a larger ring if you want to, maybe 8 chains. It depends on what you're doing with it. 6 to 8 would be fine. I usually do 6, but you know what? I'll try 8 today and see if that makes a bit of a difference. So 6 chains, 7 chains, 8 chains, however many you feel makes a nice little ring. That's flexible. That's a nice little open middle. I like the look of that. We're going to chain 4 to begin row number 1. And that chain 4 counts as a double crochet chain 1. I hear a ding. I see Luann. Hi, Luann. Luann's been a member for 58 months. Thank you, Luann. Luann, with a membership milestone, says, "Good morning, all." Good morning, Luann. Welcome, welcome. There's 172 of us here today. I guess 174 if you count the mister and myself. A little T. All right, into that chained ring, we're going to work a double crochet and a chain 1 11 times total. So your chain 4 counts as a double crochet chain 1, then you double crochet chain 1 11 times, and you'll have 12 double crochets and 12 chain 1 spaces all the way around, or an easier way to think of it is 12 spokes in a wheel. They're easier to count because there's some space in between. And I think I might work in, I'm thinking I might put a bead in every single row. So right here as I chain 1, I'm going to pull up a bead and I'm going to just sort of push it as close to my hook as I can, then ignore it and chain 1. So that's still double crochet chain 1, except that I shoved up a bead. So now I've got a bead stuck in there. And that can just hang out. Am I forgetting to chain 1? Probably. Double crochet is so quick and it comes so easily to me that I often forget. If I'm double crocheting, my hands just want to kind of keep double crocheting and I forget to chain 1. So let's pause and count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I've got 8 spokes so far, which should also mean that I have 8 chain 1 spaces in between. And I want those to rather comfortably float around that chained ring I made. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. I need to put in one more, so chain 1, double crochet, chain 1 to finish it off. I've got a little bit of leftover short tail here, not a big deal. I'll weave that in at the very end. There we go. So count them up. Make sure if you're counting your little spokes, you should have 12 of them. One will be the chain 4 that began, and the other 11 will all be double crochets, and you should have a chain 1 space in between them all. Don't forget the last chain 1 as you find the 3rd chain of that chain 4 and slip stitch to the 3rd chain of the chain 4 that began the row. Hello, Amanda. Thank you for picking up a pattern. I'm going to pick up that loop a little bit, and I'm just going to shuffle these little double crochets around my ring, just so I've got a little bit of space there and they're all kind of evenly distributed. And with use, they will open themselves out a little bit, so don't worry if they kind of bunch up on you. They will kind of loosen up as we go. But there we are. That is the first. I might just pull this little bead to the front. That is row 1 of our little web. Pretty standard doily start. For row 2, we're going to chain 5 to begin. The chain 5 will count as a double crochet, chain 2. We don't have to slip stitch anywhere. We're going to start right where we ended off row 1. Make sure you have 5 chains. And now you're just looking for the double crochet from the previous row. So there's the double crochet. If you pull it apart, you see the double crochet. I'm going to work a double crochet into the top of that stitch. And chain 2. So instead of double crochet chain 1, like row 1, now it's double crochet chain 2 for row 2. Row 3 will be double crochet chain 3. Row 4 will be double crochet chain 4. I'm sure you can see the pattern forming. It's a nice, easy way to make an ever-increasing circle with a spiderweb vibe. So 2 chains in between your double crochets. Your double crochets are always going to sit in the top of the previous double crochet from the row before. You'll always have 12 double crochets in every row, or 12 spokes if you want to look at it like that. I'm thinking if you see there's your chain 5 that began, and if you feel like it's very small or it's not so easy to see the beginning of the row after you leave row 1, because you know it's very lacy, so it might be hard to see that beginning. You can put a slip stitch, or I should say a stitch marker, on that chain 5 or the chains that begin every row, just so you kind of know where things are. I also want to evenly disperse my beads, so I think I'm going to put the other one, I don't know, I might just put that right here, you know. So I've already chained 2. I'm going to double crochet now into the next. You can chain around it, double crochet around it, whatever you like. You know what? Maybe I'll take out a chain. I'll just use the chains to secure my beads. It is a little easier. So again, you shove your bead up against your hook as tight as it'll go, then ignore it and just chain 1 like it wasn't even there. So that's still double crochet, chain, chain, but I've just kind of attached a bead in the middle of it. So double crochet into the top of every stitch. Chain 2 in between those double crochets. I should say you're double crocheting into the top of every double crochet specifically. You want to keep those wagon spokes on top of each other so that you get these uninterrupted lines running through your spider web that emanate from the center out, and that's what makes it look like a spider web. If you get a little lost, just pause, lay it down, pull it out. The larger it gets, the easier it is to count those spokes. So far I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So I'm more than halfway done row 2. Simple little double crochet, chain 2, double crochet, chain 2. When you're using really fine, thin thread and a smaller hook, you might have to go a little slower at first until your fingers get used to it. I certainly find that's the way it is for me. Let me double check that I have 12 spokes here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. There's 12. Make sure that I've got my 2 chains. I'm going to find the 3rd chain. So you're always joining to the 3rd chain of the chains that begin a row. So whether it's 4 chains, 5 chains, 6 chains, 7 chains, etc., you are always going to find the 3rd chain up and slip stitch to that. That's so you don't interrupt that pattern of that beginning chain counting as a double crochet and the little chains that you need for the space. I'm just going to fold my beads onto the inside. Let's pull up on that a little bit. And then I'm going to do a little bit of light blocking. Another thing I like to do when I'm working on small things is just pause at the end of every row and make sure that not only is my stitch count correct, the shape that I'm going for also looks correct. And if it looks like it wants to bulge a little bit, I do a little light blocking to sort of see if that fixes it, because if it does, then I know it'll lay flat eventually. But if it's really warped, then I double check my stitches. I double check the number of chains in between, because that tells me I may have made a mistake somewhere. But so far, so good. A little sip of tea. This is definitely one of those patterns that you can easily adjust the weight of the yarn or the size of the hook to get different effects, but the actual pattern itself does not need to be monkeyed with. You can just kind of just change the hook and yarn weight. So for example, if you wanted to do something really crazy like that super bulky yarn with an absolutely massive jumbo hook, follow the same pattern, you'd get a really big supersized fluffy spider web, which might be kind of fun to decorate with outside. It might even cover an entire table. That is row 2 complete. Row 3, we begin with a chain 6. And that chain 6 counts as a double crochet. That's the first 3 chains and a chain 3 space. And it's the same thing. You're looking for the double crochet from the row before. You're double crocheting into the top of it. Once you get to row 3, it is much easier to sort of see where all the stitches are, and it's much easier to see if you've missed chaining 3 now in between your spokes, because everything's getting wider. So it makes it a little easier to see. So double crochet, chain 3 now, before you find the double crochet from the previous row and double crochet into the top of it. So if you're not used to working with thread, this is a good little pattern to try, because it's very repetitive, it's very simple. It gets easier to see the larger it gets, which means that it's a little easier to kind of deal with. And you don't have to use a super small hook. I'm using what would be considered one of the medium-sized hooks, or medium in terms of like steel, regular size, and then jumbo. This is one of the regular sized ones because it's only a 2.25 millimeter or B. So it's small, but it's not crazy tiny, and it's ergonomic, so it's not difficult to hold on to. And once you have a little bit of this crochet done, you've got something more to hold on to while you're crocheting. So it's really not that tricky. Try not to crochet too tightly. That's another trick. You want to kind of pause and double check your own tension sometimes. If you're worried about losing track of the beginning, you can put your stitch marker on that chain 6 that began the row. I might skip adding a bead on this row and put one on the next row. Chain 3, double crochet into the next double crochet from the row before. Some of the tops of my stitches are a little tighter than others. I think that's just because my tension varies a little bit. When I get to the end of the row, before I slip stitch to the third chain to join, I'm going to double check that I've got all 12 spokes or 12 double crochets. So I want to make sure that I've not missed any. All right, let's count them up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. That's 12. So the chain 6 ring is better in terms of the ever increasing circle for this particular pattern. I went with 8 just to sort of try it out, and I don't think that's a big deal, especially if I want to, like, you know, drape it over a little pumpkin. I think that will fit over this little guy. That's kind of cute. But the 6 chained ring that is in the original pattern is better for just sort of the overall scale of it. But if you have very tight tension, you might find the 8 chain ring is better. Okay, so that was row 3. Row 4, we are going to chain 7 to begin. Chain 7 counts as 8 double crochet. That's the first 3 chains. And then the chain 4 that sits in between the double crochets of this row. So we double crochet still into the top of every double crochet. For some reason, I find double crocheting after I've chained a bunch sometimes to be a little funny. There we go. And then once you've double crocheted, chain 4. And if you get confused, just lay it down, tug it out a little bit. This is one of those things, because I'm using cotton, that it will block very nicely. But if you plan on actually sewing it to something like I did with my the back of my jacket, then you really want to pull it out and stretch it as you go to sew, and that will give it that very spider webby kind of look. Row 4 is 4 chains in between our double crochet spokes. I will be adding a little bead to this row, but I'm going to add it opposite the ones that I've got here. And again, if you're concerned about losing track of that first set of chains that you began the whole row with, you might want to consider adding a stitch marker to it. I'll just put my stitch marker back in place there. This is getting very lacy. I kind of like it. Feels delicate, like a spider web, which is clearly the main point. I'm going to put my bead in over here. I kind of like the sound of them rattling around. So maybe I'll do it right after this next double crochet. And I'll chain 2 of my 4 chains. I'll slide up a bead. I'll chain around that. That's number 3, and then there's number 4, and now I've just added another bead. And then I double crochet. Yes, I kind of like it. It looks like there's little raindrops or something kind of caught in it. Sort of like when you see a spider web in the early morning and there's dew in it. I think that's so pretty. All right, that should be number 12. Let me double check. Yep, that's 12. I'm all the way back around. I'm going to remove my stitch marker, find the 3rd chain of the chain 7 that began row 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Join with a slip stitch. And that's row 4. Now the original pattern has one more row to go. And I'm going to show you the one on the back of my jacket again. So just so you can see, this is row 1 and row 2. And row 1 is really, really close together, and that's a chain 6 center. So row 1, very close together. Row 2. Row 3, row 4, and row 5. And in row 5, we add these little kind of tips to it. And of course, once you've blocked it or pulled it out, it sizes up quite nicely. And once again, this was a size 3 fashion weight thread, so that's a couple sizes larger than the thread I'm using today. And I also used the F hook, the 3.75 millimeter. So this one was quite a nice size. It's 16.5 centimeters or 6.5 inches in diameter from point to point. And the one I'm making is going to be much smaller. So I thought it would be fun to add yet another row to it because the pattern won't change. You just want to keep the number of chains in between your spokes is the same number as the row you're on. So we're technically on row 5. I'm going to chain 8 to begin. I'm sorry, I'm going to chain 8 because I'm going to change the pattern a little bit. So in the original pattern, you sort of start with a little point, but I want to go one more row larger, just kind of in keeping with the pattern itself. So I'm going to chain 8. The first 3 chains are going to count as a double crochet, and the next 5 are going to be the chain space in between my double crochets. So I'm going to double crochet now into the next stitch. I'm going to put my stitch marker back in place. And like I said, I'm deviating from the original pattern just a little bit because I want to just make one more row of this ever enlarging web pattern before I give it the little finishing edge, just because I'm using a smaller hook and a lighter weight thread. So just for fun. Now there are 5 chains in between my double crochets. You can keep going. It will, depending on the size of the yarn you're using, get unmanageably large at some point. So the spaces in between your double crochets will just be kind of ridiculous. So there is sort of a natural limit to this pattern, but it definitely can still keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So if you want a slightly larger web, you can keep adding rows. And the only real difference between them will be the number of starting chains, the first 3 of which will always count as a double crochet, so keep that in mind. And then the number of chains in between double crochets has to be the same number as the row you're on. So we're on row 5, that means there's 5 chains in between. Very pretty. Five chains in between the double crochets. By this point, it's very easy to see where the next double crochet is because the spaces in between are quite large. Sometimes I feel it helps to hold on to that last chain that I made. Sometimes I need to, sometimes I don't. A couple more to go. This really feels like a web. All right, I think I'm at the end. I'm going to count them up. Make sure I still have 12. Yep. So I'm going to chain my final 5 chains for this row 5. And then I'm going to find the third chain of the chain 8 that began the row. There it is there. I'm going to slip stitch to join. So now I've added 1 extra row of the little web pattern just because I'm using such a small, see now if you pull it too from different points, like let's say you were attaching this to something, like a ring, you wanted to put this inside like a ring to act like it's an actual spider web, or just sew it to something. You don't have to sew it evenly. If you sew it kind of in you know, slightly uneven points of tension, you really get what looks like an actual spider web. So I love that. Okay, let's do a final row. The final row, I'm going to add little beads to the very ends of the little points on each of my, there's sort of like it's the spokes. I'm thinking of them as sort of the main spokes that run through it. There's going to be a little point that sort of runs out of the top of each one. So we actually begin the final row with the little point, and that means we're starting with a chain 6. The chain 3 at the beginning of this chain 6, so the first 3 chains does count as a double crochet, but we're going to slip stitch into the second chain from the hook. Actually, before we do that, oh my goodness gracious, Mary, thank you so much for picking up a pattern. Before I slip stitch into the second chain from the hook, I'm going to get my bead up here because I want my bead to be right at the very end. So before I do my slip stitch into the second chain from the hook, I'm going to get my bead up to the top. Then I will do my slip stitch into the second chain from the hook. I will slip stitch into the third chain from the hook. And now I've made the little point that sits out top of the end of that spoke. So if I lay it flat, you can see this is the spoke running through the entire web. So if I kind of pull it out, you can see that little spoke there. The chain 3 at the the 3 chains, the first 3 chains of the chain 6 that begins the final row, counts as a double crochet. So I'm continuing that spoke, but then I'm adding a little kind of like blip out the end. I'll show you my finished one here on the back of my jacket. So every little spoke ends with a little kind of a point to it. And if you're going to attach this to something, you're going to attach it at these 12 little points. For me today, I'm going to add a little bead at the end. So that's why I pre-strung those beads. So before I slip stitch in the second chain away from the hook, I'll shove my bead up, then I'll slip stitch around it, and that will leave the beads at the very end. Nico! Thank you, Nico. Nico has gifted another membership, our gifting ninja. Swooping in. Congratulations to Amelia, who's won it. A little sip of tea to celebrate. Thank you so much. All right, let's chain 6. We're on row 6, so that means we have to have 6 chains in between double crochets. So we're going to chain 6. So that's the regular spaces in between. Then we're going to double crochet into the next stitch, which is the double crochet from the previous row. So you're still double crocheting into the tops of the double crochets from the previous row. But before you continue on, you want to add now these little points. So for me, that means I chain 3. So we all chain 3 to create the little point. And then you slip stitch into the second and third chains from the hook. But before I do that, I'm going to move my bead up. Then I'm going to find the second chain from the hook and I'll slip stitch. Ding, ding. Carrie! Hey, Carrie! Carrie with a super chat. Thank you so much, Carrie. Carrie says, for some reason, I can't gift a membership, so here's a super chat instead. Thank you so much. If you're already a member, you can gift a membership. I don't know why you can't see it. It should be there under that $sign, but it could be glitching out. I know that's not the first time. But thank you very much for the super chat. I appreciate that. And Joanna, speaking of memberships, has just gifted a membership. So Joanna gifted a membership. Thank you so much. Congratulations to Rosenda, who won it. Thank you both. And a little sip of tea. Okay, I chained 3, I slipped up a bead, I slip stitched into the second chain from the hook. I'm going to slip stitch into the third chain from the hook. That completes the little point. And I've got a bead attached to it now, which also helps me really pull things out. So that's really going to make it look good when I've got the whole thing blocked out. It's another thing I notice about working with thread. It can look like a great big fiery mess under your hands while you're working on it. But it's one of those things that really benefits from blocking, steam blocking, starching, washing, and letting dry flat. So don't be discouraged if you think it looks a little bit funny. It could just be that it needs to be blocked. All right, so I've slip stitched into the second chain from the hook after moving up a bead, then into the third chain from the hook. And now I'm going to chain 6 for my new space, because I'm on row 6. I'm going to double crochet into the next stitch, which is that double crochet right there. Nice and easy, working tiny, got to be a little more patient than I normally am. There we go. And now before I leave, I want to do another one of these little points. So I chain 3. And then before I slip stitch into the second chain from the hook, I'm going to shuffle up a bead, get that bead as close to me as I can. Slip stitch into the second chain from the hook. That secures the bead. Slip stitch into the third chain. So into the second, into the third. Now I've got a little bead tucked up there. This is also going to create a little bit of weight, so it'll like to lie flat. Now I'm going to chain 6. There's my 6 chains, double crochet into the next stitch, the next double crochet from the previous row. And before I leave, I create a little point. So I chain 3. Shuffle up a bead, get it as close to me as I can. Find the second chain from the hook and slip stitch into it, making sure that I grab the thread on the other side of the bead. That secures the bead. There we go. Slip stitch into the third chain, and that's that little point complete. Easy does it. There we go. And now I chain 6. And double crochet into the next stitch, and so on and so on and so on. So after, on that final row, however many rows you do, on your final row you're adding those little extra points, and that just basically gives your spider web little anchors essentially. There's my little point started, chain 3, I slide up a bead, slip stitch into the second chain by grabbing the thread on the other side of the bead. There we go. And slip stitch into the next chain. That's that one. Chain 6 and repeat. Make a little point, slide up a bead, take a moment to lay it all down, pull everything out. So these little beads really do help me kind of block it as I go. It gives me sort of an anchor to pull on. There we go. So now I've really got what looks like a web starting. Chain 6. I don't mind working a little slower than I have to, or that I'm used to, I should say, because I find like the little finicky work, even though it might take a little bit more time, I always feel it's so worth it when it's done. I feel like it looks so neat. You've made something that actually looks like lace. Chain 3 for a point. Slide up a bead. Slip stitch into the second chain around that bead. And into the third chain. There's my point. Chain 6. There we go. And double crochet into the next stitch. Come here, you. I don't actually, I didn't have plans to put on a spider. I kind of like the look of the empty web, kind of like the spider's out. Like there almost needs to be a back in 10 minutes sign, kind of like he's out grocery shopping. Even spiders like to vary their diet.
He's out. Be back in 10 minutes.
Let's make sure I haven't missed anything here. I think a bead, because this one is so lacy and fancy, I think a beaded spider would look really cool. Or maybe a little button spider. That might be kind of cute. There we go. Where am I at? Oh, a couple more pokes. Couple more spokes to go. All right. Now, where am I at? One more double crochet, which means one more little point. And I slung on extra beads because I was thinking I might add more to the actual body of the web, and I didn't, and that's fine. I added 3 as opposed to 5. 6 more chains to finish. I want to find the third chain, which will be pretty much underneath that little point that began this row. And then I'm going to fasten off. I'll pull these other 2 beads off and put them aside. And before I weave that in, I'm going to take a moment to just use the heat of my hand to kind of do a little bit of light blocking. I'm also pulling out on these beads. If you don't have beads there, you're just pulling out on the little tips, and gently, of course. This is thread crochet after all. You don't have to be a great big monster about it. And there we go. Now, if I decide to drape this over something, the little beads will kind of hold the edge down. I'm thinking I might get it Will it fit on this one? Let's see. I'm gonna, you know what? Let me weave in my tails first. So flip this over. Gosh, I just love the sound of that. I'm gonna weave in the little one on the back around row 1 here first. And I don't want that to be too closed up. I will trim it though. I don't need a whole lot there. And then I think with this one, I'm actually going to try and weave it down the along the back of these, of the actual the spoke. So I'm just going to weave it down by picking up the back edges of the little chains here. And I'm using an actual darning needle, so I don't want to split my thread, if I can help it. I might have to put my glasses on for this. So I'm just going to, I'm picking up the loops on the backs of these chains as I go down the spoke. And I'm heading back down towards row 1 where the cluster of double crochets is pretty close together, and it'll make weaving in this tail a little easier and a little less likely to be seen. So I've gone down through a few here. All right. So I'm going to just pull up on that because I don't want that to actually pull it out of alignment. Good. And now I'm going to come right down through the backs of that. So I think I'm on row 2 here. I'm just sort of working my way down to the back edges of row 1. There we go. Down to row 1. And once again, before I weave it in any further, I'm going to keep pulling up on that because I don't want it to, I don't want to like cinch those stitches together. And then I'm going to weave them underneath the edges or the stitches of row 1 because they're close together. And I'm only going to go in one direction as opposed to going back and forth because I want this to keep some looseness to it. I don't want it to run the risk of being cinched up. But if I weave it down through enough stitches, I don't worry about it coming undone. Also, this isn't like going to see a whole lot of activity. There, I think that's enough. I'm going to trim that little tail. Put that to the side. Needle in a safe place. Okay, flip it back over. Here we go. So once more, I'm going to pull these little guys out. I've just crocheted a lace cobweb. How fun. And let's try it on this pumpkin. Let's see if I can get it on over top of this little. There we go. Yeah. Now that's a fancy little pumpkin. So it would benefit from a bit of light blocking. So a little bit of dampness, you know, like from a spritz bottle or something. And then like I pull it out, pin it in place and let it dry. But that doesn't look too bad. Golly. What do you think, Mr. InStitches?
I think it looks good. Can I see it from the side?
Mm-hmm. Kind of makes your pumpkins look a little fancier.
Yeah, like they're dressed up for Halloween.
Yeah, I also just think, you know, I like sort of the elegance of that. I think, you know, the Thanksgiving table centerpiece would benefit from just a hint of, you know, spooky season yet to come. I think I'd put one of those in the middle of the table. I like the way that looks. Yeah, so you can use that cobweb pattern of ours. I'll make sure that the link to that original tutorial is in the description box down below. So if you want to sort of see the more concise version of it. Also, it's the 5-row version as opposed to this being the 6-row version. I made this 6 rows today because I was using the thread. You could keep going. You could do 7 rows, 8 rows, doesn't matter. It's always the same pattern. The double crochet sits on top of the double crochet from the previous row. There's always 12 of them in each row. And whatever row number you're on is the number of chains in between double crochets. So for example, if you were going to continue with a row 7, you would chain 10 to begin, because that first 3 chains counts as a double crochet, and then there'd be 7, and then double crochet, chain 7, double crochet, chain 7, that's row 7. If you wanted to make row 7 your final row, you would start with the little blip, so that's chain 6. And the chain 3 counts as the double crochet spoke, but then you're starting that little tip before you then chain 7 and then double crochet, chain 7, double crochet, chain 7. So your row 5 of the pattern can be your final row, any row. It just depends on how many rows you've done up to that point. But your final row will always start like row 5, which is chain 6, because you're creating that little post and your little fancy tip before you begin with your chains. So you're just completing that before you create the chained spaces in between. So you can just keep making that bigger and bigger and bigger. And I'm thinking that it would be really cool to play with different colors. So I might give this a go a little later on today. I'm still I've got a lot of plans actually for my Fiesta thing, but I thought maybe a rainbow cobweb might look kind of neat. I used the ecru or the antique white for this one, and I really like that. I just feel like that has a quality to it that maybe the bright white doesn't have. The original one I did, that I have here on the back of my jacket, is a size 3 crochet thread, which is also known as a fashion weight. I use Aunt Lydia. There's obviously different kinds of crochet threads out there, but this is the crochet thread I use the most frequently, and I really like it. It's a really good thread. And this was a kind of an off-white that I used as opposed to an antique. It was an off-white. I obviously have a nice bright white. That would be fun. And I also have these are all cottons, by the way. I also thought I might give it a try with a slightly thicker yarn just to make a bigger one, because then it would look kind of neat as a centerpiece. Just something simple. You can put a vase on it or even a pumpkin or something. Use it as like a little doily underneath a decoration or a vase or even a plate if you make it big enough. And if you make them, I would love to see them. So please feel free to share photos with us at the Etsy shop. The link to our Etsy shop is always in the description box of our videos and live streams. You can just click on that, scroll down the page until you see contact or message seller, like Amanda just did. Amanda just sent us a message. And you can attach a photo by either clicking on the little camera icon or the little landscape photo icon that's in the message box if you're on a computer or laptop. So yeah, Mr. InStitches, have you got anything you'd like to add?
Someone would like to know how big the pumpkin is.
Oh, the little gourd that I've got here. This is a gourd. So if I put it in my hands, so there's an idea of what it is in my hands. I'll even measure it for you. Let me find my measuring tape. So this little chubster is it's under 5 inches or about 12 centimeters in diameter, and from top to bottom, so excluding the stem, 8 centimeters tall, or about 3 inches, I guess. Yeah, about 3.5 inches, 3 inches tall. So it's a gourd as opposed to a pumpkin. So this is the gourd. This is a pumpkin pie pumpkin. So these are the little pumpkins you'd buy to actually cook and eat. And it's just a little bit bigger, and its stem is a bit thicker, but on the gourds, the stem's a little thinner. But it's stretchy, so if you have to, you can sort of squeeze it down there. If you're making it for a larger pumpkin, so let's say you wanted to decorate one of your big boys, and if you've seen the cover thumbnail for our live streams this fall, we've got our collection of pumpkins outside, and some of them are absolutely massive. I just love them. Of course, the bigger the pumpkin, the bigger the stem, so you might have more luck using a larger weight yarn and a thicker or a bigger hook, just to kind of make sure that you're scaling up evenly. And you can sort of start with, like, I'm guessing if you have here's a 4.5 millimeter hook. It's also a size 7. This is a 2 or a 3 weight. So I'm going to chain 6, which is what
This pattern on
Yes, it's featured. It's up top.
It's called something different.
It's called Spiderweb Doily, I think. Spiderweb. Yeah, Spiderweb. So if I try 8 chains, so if you do 8 chains with a 4.5 millimeter hook and a thinner weight, like a size 2, or even, I think it's even smaller than a 3, a DK weight, it'll fit over a pie pumpkin stem, and of course this will stretch. There you go. So the bigger the pumpkin, the thicker the stem, the bigger the hook. So if you go with a size 4 medium weight and like a 5.5 millimeter, like an I9 or even a J hook, then it would fit over that, and then you would just have one that's bigger that sort of drapes over the top of that one. So yeah, experiment. Use whatever you've got. Don't be afraid of color. Spiders' webs, if they're covered in dew, they look almost like rainbowy in the sunlight. So have fun with it. And if you have photos, please feel free to share them at our Etsy shop, and we'll be happy to share them with the community at large in our community tab. Yes, the tutorial, so we'll make sure, Marie, that the tutorial for the original tutorial will be linked in the description box. I'll make sure that's there after we've wrapped up the live stream. And the pattern, the written pattern, is in the Etsy shop. It should be up top. Let me just double check. I'm pretty sure I put it there today. So let's see here. Doodly-doo. Yep, featured listings. There it is, up top. It's a crochet spiderweb pattern, and it's the black one. Black. It's the white on black. It's a big. It's pretty clear looking spiderweb. So you should be able to see it up top there. Always remember that you can refresh. So if you've logged in already to Etsy, then and you're not seeing things, or things look a little old, refresh or log out. Clear your history of your browser, your cache, and then log back in again. And if there's been updates to Etsy, if there's been updates to your favorite shops, that will all show. So remember, if at first things don't look perfectly right, then refresh the page. All right, my dears, we will see you later this week. Definitely Friday for a Friday video, possibly a little earlier. I've been working on a little side project that I thought I might share with you. So if I have that ready, I might have that for you a little later on this week. Until then, stay safe, stay crafty, have a wonderful week.